As Rav Khan mentioned about the idea of Elu V'Elu D'Velikim Chaim, we understand many different perspectives of Torah, and we were, I'm sure, strengthened by his words. The aspect of Elu V'Elu is also a continent-wide perspective, that we can receive different perspectives of Torah from different stages of different countries. In Musar Avicha, I think I counted once, we have 12 different countries. Right, David? No, right, 12, I think we have Ethiopia, Russia, we have Baruch Hashem, many languages. So it's an opportunity to do it in English. But the Musar Avicha should definitely thank Rav Adlerstein a lot. His mistake was that when he made Aliyah, and he walked into my Kol Eretz Chemda, he made the big mistake of sitting next to me. He's been paying for it ever since. So we happen to have a very good connection. I consider myself a Talmud Chaver, and whenever I've had an obstacle or question to ask or advice, it's always been a great opportunity to turn to him. So Musar Avicha definitely deserves to give him some thank as well. As I mentioned, continent-wide Torah, Rav Adlerstein has come from the farthest possible place that I can think of from Eretz Yisrael, Los Angeles, made Aliyah recently. And he brings his Torah both from New York and Los Angeles and Eretz Yisrael, and we're meriting to Mamash Kibbutz Lod Mechaber Alamot. So I honored to hear his words of Torah. I'd like to invite him to come and speak. Please everybody rise.
So back in the old country, they didn't really have rabbis. And they had shul rabbanim, but the Rav spoke only twice a year. And to fill up the calendar, they had itinerant magidim. People used to go around from town to town, they'd ask permission from the Rav, and they would speak. And that was actually entertaining. They would go 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. Then Sunday morning they'd come back to shul and people would pay them something for their trouble. So a fellow writes to a Rav. He asks permission to come months in advance, and he shows up. And in shul, Shabbos afternoon, there are two people. And that's before they could record things and put it on the internet. So he had no choice. He had to do his show anyway. He went over to the Rav afterwards and he said, I don't understand what happened. Didn't I write to you months in advance? Yes, you did. Didn't we agree that I would come and speak in the shul? Yes, you did. Didn't you get the word out that I was coming? Yes, I did. But a few people showed up anyway. So I'm grateful that despite the fact that your Rebbe did a great job, I saw a beautiful flyer, getting the word out, that you came anyway. You're very, very fortunate to have the Rebbe that you do. I could speak a long time about his milas, but I've been around the block a couple of times, and I'm used to two kinds of Rabbanim. One kind will bend over backwards to do anything to please the congregants. They really want to make it work for them. Then there's a second kind of Rav who will do anything to please the Ribbono Shel Olam. The two usually don't coincide. You have someone who is absolutely committed to meticulously doing HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon, and yet I see him even in the Beis Medrash, always looking for new ideas, talking to people. What can he bring to the shul, and what should we do to get to address this issue or that issue, with an unusual amount of energy. Bezos Hashem, you should continue to motivate him and to feed into him. It has to be that his energy is coming from you. Other people would have been worn down, but the shidduch has to be a very good one. And thank you all for reminding me what a real shul looks like. It's the one thing that I miss about America is a shul, a kehillah, a shul, rather than a prayer drop-in center, which is what most of the city that I live in is used to. Let me share with you my nightmare scenario. You'll forgive me for still being a little bit of an American and talking about something that in America we held from a lot called Kiruv Rechokim. Not quite sure how it plays out here, but I was heavily involved with that. It's still part of my self-definition, what I did for decades. So in schools in the States, and I think I've seen it here as well, for a different reason, parents would find Friday night at their place at the table a stack of papers, which were parsha sheets. Now in America, the reason for the parsha sheet is very, very obvious. People are paying tuition through their nose, and you have to do something to convince the parents that what they're spending is worthwhile. So kids come home with a series of questions. They spend all week memorizing the answers. And then the parents ask them the questions, and lo and behold, some of the kids know some of the answers. And the parents feel, my kid is both the smartest kid on the face of the earth, and the school's doing a great job. Imagine the following. You have a coworker who's not frum. There are nebuch a few people in this country who are still in that position. And you're a responsible Jew, so you hatch a plot, expose them to the beauty of Torah, maybe you'll ignite a fire a little bit, you'll be able to pull them in. Okay? There's a young couple, great credentials, Ivy League schools, working for a great company, and very, very cynical about religion. You try again and again, you importune them, come to my house on Hillel Shabbos, you like it. We have 5 brands of single malt scotch, and finally they agree. But what happens is, they come a week before Purim. So, you're going through the sheet, the parsha sheet, and you ask, okay, what holiday's coming up next week? And the kids are sitting around the table. Oh, they get it right, it's Purim. And you go through the next question, and then you read question number 5, and before you could put the period on the sentence, you realize that you blew it. Question number 5 was, so when Achashverosh called for Vashti to come, why did she say no? And 3 kids jump out of their seats and spontaneously say, because she grew a tail. And then you know that you lost them. They will never come back again. You took a perfectly beautiful story that they knew a little bit about, and you've turned it into some kind of a fairy tale. Okay, what does it mean that Vashti grew a tail? Hold the question. Make sure I don't leave until I answer that. I have this habit of going through the rest of my notes and never getting around to the answer. But I'm whetting your appetite. What I'm talking about this evening is about Agadah, 1/3 of the Talmud, that is not halakha, that is not strictly law, but contains all of the philosophy, Weltanschauung, ethics, history, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, all of it put together. I'm old enough to remember people, droves, in the late lamented conservative movement of blessed memory. And one of their key lines was, the Orthodox, they only do the legal stuff, the strict stuff, and they lose the whole spirit of the law, which is contained in the Agadah. We in the conservative movement treat them equally. We ignore both. At that time, they held that they were still practicing both. That didn't work out too well, but it was one of the most common complaints from outside of Orthodoxy about Orthodoxy, that we ignore the spirit of the Agadah. You were supposed to make that announcement about turning off your... There we go. Additionally today we live in an age of skepticism. You never know what's going on in a kid's mind. Kids see all kinds of things, and they nod in class, and Rebbeim themselves don't even know what the kids are thinking. And often kids are thinking, am I really supposed to believe that? And often Rebbeim, even if they were challenged by the question, would not know exactly how to answer it. All discussion of Haggadah, as far as I'm concerned, starts with the Rambam in his Haggadah to Chelek, where he talks about three groups of people and their attitude towards Haggadah. He says there's one group of people that reads this stuff. He said, am I supposed to believe this nonsense? This is crazy. This is crazy. And I will admit I had that answer, that attitude at one point. I almost lost it myself. I was a little bit of a skeptic when I was a teenager, and then somebody once told me, a medrash, that Og Melech HaBashan used to fry his eggs on the sun. That didn't go over too well with my rational sense. And Baruch Hashem, Hashkacha had it that just at that time, the Chavrusa came back from Eretz Yisrael and straightened me out. Not everybody else is that fortunate. The Rambam says, the first group says, this stuff is nonsense. And if this is what it's about, I'm out of here. They close the book. He says, most of the people in this first category are physicians. Why physicians? They were the intelligentsia of his day. I don't think he had anything against doctors in particular, even though they were his colleagues. He meant the people who are heavily into thinking. So those are the Jews who rejected Haggadah entirely and threw out a lot more with it. He said, and then there's a second group. The second group says, I'm a Maimin, and this is Heilige Torah, and if this is what the Gemara says, or the Medrash says, or Hamodia says, then it has to be emes. And I don't care what they say, I'm going to be proud of it, I'm going to shout it from the rooftops. And the Rambam says, what do you say about that second group? He says they think they're doing the Ribbon Shalom a favor, but they're doing the opposite. He says, whereas the Torah says, Rak am chacham v'navon, hagoy hagadol hazeh, what a wonderful, comprehending, intelligent people is this great nation. Instead, when people listen to the second group, they say, Rak am navol v'sochol hagoy hakaton hazeh. So what is the proper attitude? Rambam says there's a third group. Alas, they're the smallest. The third group says, hey, something's wrong here. I just finished a sugya in Bava Kama. It took me 6 weeks with my chavrusa and the whole chevra to do 5 lines of Gemara. And we still don't have it down pat. This is so deep. The people who contributed to this were such chachamim. Is it possible that people who were so smart wrote drivel? Could it be? Can't be. It must be that I'm missing the key to unlocking what they're saying. That I don't understand what they're trying to communicate. That there's some kind of hidden language or something that I'm not getting. And I'm going to try harder, and I'm going to push my way through until I finally get it. The Rambam says that's the right attitude. To understand that those who wrote the Haggadah, the Talmidei Chachamim, they sometimes had the same names, they sometimes had different names, but they were the same group of Chazal. They were Yirei Shamayim, they were deep, they were profound, they were makabel the Masorah, and they weren't capable of writing nonsense. Now, what was the Rambam's approach to Haggadah? He gives us a hint, and this is crucially important whenever you're challenged. In the Hakdama to Moreh Nevuchim, he writes about allegory, and he writes that I have a plan, that I'm going to go through all of Haggadah, and I'm going to explain it the way I understand it. Nebuch, he never did, as far as we know. We don't think that the book was lost. We think that the Rambam just did not get around to writing his allegorical perush of Agadas Chazal, particularly in the Gemara. You find that others took the same approach. And they argued that the things that are the most difficult to understand, the fault is within us, and we have to understand what they're really talking about. We're going to skip a couple hundred years and get to a person who made the most important contribution to understanding Agadah. Is this possible? Could it take hundreds of years before somebody came along and did what the Rashba and the Rambam didn't? Yes, it's possible. The Maharal was the first person, as far as I know, who set himself to try systematically to develop a methodology for interpreting Chazal. And my own interest in the Maharal comes from two things. One, I'm a skeptic, and Maharal was a lifesaver. And B, I was in the classroom for many, many years. Many years of high school education, and I was convinced that many of my students were direct descendants of the Maharal's golem. The Maharal lived in unusual time, very intellectually active time. It's officially called the Rudolphine period. The emperor of the Holy Roman Empire was a fellow by the name of Rudolph. He was not a red-nosed reindeer. He was an emperor. He treated the Jews pretty well, relatively. He was so impressed with the Maharal that a lot of people know the story that he had a great meeting with the Maharal and he conferred a herald on the Maharal that was on the Maharal's door until the first decade of the 20th century. What people don't know is that they think that he sent a carriage for the Maharal. The Maharal went to the castle. If you've visited Prague, you know that castle on the hill. And Maharal went there and had a nice afternoon tea with him. It wasn't that way at all. Rudolph came to him from the castle down the hill, and they spent hours together. Unfortunately, we don't have a recording, but apparently the meeting went relatively well. The Maharal had a huge impact on Prague. This statue, larger-than-life statue of the Maharal, is in front of the Prague City Hall, and it even survived the Nazis. The tourist item that you find in the airport in Prague and all over town, little clay figurines of the golem. The golem, which we're not going to talk about tonight, and I don't think it's the most interesting part of Maharal at all, but the reputation of the Maharal continued to grow. He actually remained undiscovered for quite a while after his death. If you want to remember the years when the Maharal was the most productive, I shouldn't say this, maybe we have to take it off the tape. For those of you who heard of William Shakespeare, the years in which Shakespeare did his histories and some of his greatest other plays were the Lahavdil, Elef Havdalas, the years that the Maharal was the most productive. Last decade of the 16th century, first couple of years of the 17th century. The Maharal is credited for bridging worlds. You know the story about the poor yeshiva guy who's on a date for the first time. So what do yeshiva guys do when they have any question about something new? They go to their Rebbe. So he'd never, really talked to a member of the opposite gender who wasn't a relative in the family. So he asked his Rebbe, what do you talk about? I'm afraid I'm just going to have nothing to say. He says, listen, there's an eitzah that'll work. Remember the 3 F's. 3 F's. Family, food, and philosophy. Rebbe went to a high school in Brooklyn. These are yes. So he takes He picks up the girl, they're in the car, nobody says anything, and finally he says, "Oh, Saraleya, how's your brother?" She says, "I don't have a brother." Okay, strike one. A couple of seconds later, he remembers, oh, there's the second F is food. Saraleya, we're going to go out to eat. How do you like your potatoes? I hate potatoes. Uh-oh. He's down to his last one, philosophy. And a light bulb goes off in his head. Saraleya, if you had a brother, how would he like his potatoes? Some people think that that's what philosophy is. This philosophy gets to be a good deal more serious than that, and as you know, at many times in Jewish history, it was a serious threat to Jewish self-understanding. Maharal bridged the gap between three different areas of intellectual life: philosophy, science, and Kabbalah. He managed to merge all of them, and he managed to do it in such a way that some people credit Maharal with the ability of real B'nai Torah, real committed Orthodox people, to pursue science, even though, topic for another occasion, science at times seems to say very different things from what you find in the pages of the Gemara. We're going to give you in a moment one such example of how that worked. His technique is different from that of almost everybody who came before. Maharal is one of the only people who wrote topically. We're used to people in the time of the Rishonim who wrote running commentaries. We know that there were people in the time of the Gaonim who wrote one-volume philosophies, but to write whole books on different topics, this seems to be the invention of Maharal. He wrote a sefer on Yetzias Mitzrayim. He wrote on Torah. He wrote about Geula. Almost unheard of before then. The most important part of his technique was that he believed intensely with every fiber of his being in the profundity of Chazal. Everything that he said, he used a Maimer Chazal as a springboard. He was not interested in conveying his own opinions, even though it has to come out, but he wanted you to see that in his mind, his opinion was not important unless he felt that this was what Chazal were saying. That it's there and it has to be resident within Chazal. He takes an allegorical approach, not because he can't believe the Pashup Pshat. Give you one example. A Gemara that I'm sure most of you have heard of, Gemara in Shabbos, I think, about a widower, person who was married. His wife Nebuch died in childbirth. He was dirt poor. No job, no funds, not even a Visa credit card. And he had no way of feeding the child. What does the Gemara say? He davened and he shook the Sharei Shamayim, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu did a nest for him, and he was able to nurse the child. And there's a machlokas in the Gemara, whether it's a good thing, it's a bad thing. Lots of Hasidic and Misnagdish jokes about it, but that's the Gemara. Maharal says, if you ask me what it means that he nursed the child, I would tell you that I think it means the following. It means that he was a guy who had no skills, no networking, no vocation, and his child was going to die. And one day, he's pacing back and forth, wondering, what's he going to do? How's he going to raise this child? And he's walking in Manhattan in front of corporate headquarters of some Fortune 500 company. And just as he's walking past, the guy walks out and he says, "Young man, you look like a healthy human specimen. You need a job?" He takes him up to corporate headquarters, puts him in front of a desk, and you know what? He does the job well, really well. 6 months later, he has 3 promotions, and he's a vice president of a corporation. Is that any less miraculous, says the Maharal, than if he were able to nurse the child? Not any more. It's not any harder or easier to the Rebbeinu Shalom. providing a parnasa, shelo kederech hateva. That's what I think Chazal meant. But wait a second. To prove to you that it's not because, God doesn't do that kind of thing. Maral says, it could very well be that I'm wrong. That he actually was able to nurse the child. We have a Mesorah that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does nisim for tzaddikim in every door. I have no problem with such a pshat. I still think that it's more likely that what I'm saying is the pshat. That's not because he doesn't want to see divine intervention of overturning the laws of nature. It's because he has this emunah in the way Chazal speak and communicate and the language that they use, that he says the pshatim that he does. I'm going to try to give to you, in a short period of time, exposure to three different types of presentations that the Maral does. The first one is short biurim, things that are almost like one-liners. First one is, there are no children in the audience. It's, you have to be circumspect about where you send the video. There is a description of Paro in the Gemara. Have any idea what Paro looked like? Anybody remember? What does the Gemara say? How tall was he? 1 amma. Okay? Gemara says he was 1 amma tall, and his beard was 1 amma long, and one part of his anatomy, which we will not mention, was also 1 amma long. Weird looking dude. I'd like to know where he got his suits. What does that mean? What do you do with a Maimar Chazal like that? Now there are people around who'll say that, Chazal say that that's what he was, that's what he looked like. Maral says it's impossible. They don't make people like that. Because I'll tell you what it means. Paro was a bigger-than-life figure. He was somebody who had the moxie to be able to stand up to Moshe Rabbeinu, playing games with him. He could have, from the beginning, said, throw the guy into a dungeon. He didn't, because he was the guy who was into the challenge. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't take like nothings and make them the worthy opponents or unworthy opponents of Klal Yisrael. But what was he really? What was there inside? What was there beyond the bluster? Says the Maral, he was not 1 amma tall. When he went shopping, he says, my guess is he was a 40 regular. That's how he got suits off the rack. But Chazal, when they speak about people, speak about what a person would look like if the essence of a person could express itself physically. He says this again and again and again in his works. Many places where you see descriptions that you say can't be, he was this tall, that fat, this. Chazal talk not about the chitzonis, but the pnimius of the person, what the person would look like if their real mahus, their real essence, were able to express itself visibly. Paro would seem like a very, very insignificant person. What would you see? You'd see his beard. In ancient and modern times, the beard was the sign of male hirsute activity. This is how you presented yourself. That's a sign of his gaiva. His gaiva was as big as himself. I think we have a guy in the White House like that today. But and what else? The third element meant that he was also a big Baal Taiva. His Taiva could completely describe himself as well.
Also the Rishon that said it was from one side to the other side. Is that also the...
He has a beautiful pshat in that, in Gur Aryeh and Devarim. Here's another... No, I'm going to skip it because I see I'm working against the clock. They're longer pieces. I'm going to give you a little shtickle of a longer piece. The Mishnah in Avos, about who's from the Talmidim of Avram and who's from the Talmidim of Bilam HaRasha. Let's go straight to the juicy stuff. Today it's not controversial anymore. I think they have websites for people like that. But what do Chazal say was Bilam's marital status, to put it mildly? Bilam had a thing with, according to Gemara, his chamor, with his donkey. Chazal say that Bilam ba al asono. Now that was the object of his romantic interest. Maybe she was a good-looking donkey. How do you explain that to people, to the guests at the table? How do you explain it to yourself? Okay, we don't like Bilam. He was a bad guy, so he was into bestiality. Today, it's not even considered so much of a problem anymore. It's the in thing. But until very, very, very recently, that was considered to be, something that doesn't. You don't see any remez of it in the psukim. Why would you say that about Bilam? So this is how the Maral handles it. Part of this is not completely the Maral. I'm throwing in a little bit from a Rashba, but it's really, I believe, what the Maral means. Why does the Torah make such a big deal out of people's modes of transportation, which you find in a few places? Whose modes of transportation are noted by Chazal? Avram, Bilam, who else? Mashiach. What do they have in common? Says the Maral. You ever wonder where Chamor got its name from? What does Chamor mean? What are the cognate words related to Chamor? Chomer. What does Chomer mean? Clay, substance. So, Chomer. So back in the old days, when you went into a dealership to buy a new chariot, they didn't talk about horsepower. They talked about like how many chamorim were under the hood. Because the chamor was seen as a really dumb but strong animal. It represented the idea just of substance without anything up there. Without any real intelligence. Why is it important that Avram saddled up his chamor on the way to the Akedah? Why is Mashiach depicted as riding a chamor? Start with the easy one, Avram Avinu. We still freak out when we try to imagine ourselves getting a communication like that from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Take your son, shecht him, and Avram reacts with alacrity. We can't get our heads around it. But one thing I can tell you for sure, says the Maral, he had to have 1,000% control of his physical self. He had to be in the driver's seat. Whatever chomrios there was, he was in the saddle. He rode atop his chamor. Mashiach, one day, some guy is going to be riding along on the 6, and he's going to hear a voice. Hello, this is God speaking. I want you to redeem the world. Okay. Who's been playing tricks on? Where's that coming from? No, this is God speaking. So I'll pull over to the side, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu will tell him, no, it's really me, and you're the one, and you're going to redeem the world. What's the proper thing to do at a point like that? Like drop dead. That's like really the rational thing. Like, where do you begin to redeem the world? To take on a job like that means that Mashiach as well is going to have perfect control. Perfect control. Whatever he's up there, his seichel, his neshama, is going to be entirely in the driver's seat. What about Bilam? What about Bilam? Big machlokas rishonim. Was he a kosein? Was he a navi? But Chazal do say that he could have been the Moshe of his door. He wouldn't have been the same as Moshe, but for what their needs were, he was a born leader, he had insight, he understood who HaKadosh Baruch Hu was. You don't get there just by stumbling over things and happening to be right. Bilam had to be somebody who spent lots and lots of his time, lots of years, understanding who Hashem was, doing philosophy, maybe even with a PH instead of an F, and not spending his time doing video games. He was a serious student. He achieved something. So does that make him like Avraham Avinu? No. What's the difference? Avraham Avinu's vehicle was what? Do we say? A donkey. Which kind of donkey? A chamor. What was Bilam's? An ason. What's the difference? An ason is female. Forgive me for sounding provincial, but it used to be that people thought that there was like some attraction between males and females. Now we know all about gender fluidity and it's all narishkeit, but some of us still believe that there's a natural attraction of male to female. Halo davarhu, that Bilam's chamor was not a male chamor, but it was an ason. That meant that even though Bilam did achieve a good deal of transcendence, but there was a residual attraction to his chamrius that he could not conquer, and that's why he was a perfect setup for Balak's offer, money, more covered, more money, and Bilam was ready to take his principles and sell them down the river, to take everything that he had learned and understood, because he had too much of a connection to the residual chomrius. As much as he was partially in the driver's seat, it wasn't enough. And when you're on that madrega and you don't get it really right, you can fall really, really low. Here's one totally different kind of problem. I taught at Loyola Law School about 15 years before getting here, and had the privilege of teaching a little bit of Chazal, almost entirely to Jews, but usually a few Goyim in the class as well. Yeah, they were the ones who did best in the class because they didn't take it for granted. Usually evangelical Christians who were just thrilled with the idea that you could get all that meaning out of the Bible. That's amazing. So we go through the various parts of halacha. I taught 2 different semesters of Jewish law, and like kids in elementary school, what's one of the first things you do when you want to introduce kids to Gemara? Well, first parak kids learn is, you ask anybody outside of our community, they think must be something holy like Shabbos or kashrus or eating bagels and lox. But what is it in fact that you do with children first? Elu Mitzias. Elu Mitzias. Elu Mitzias. Very, whole drushes about why that's true. And the first crack at Gemara is Elu Mitzias. Okay, one of the things you encounter in that parak, and that my students encountered when they went through all the Rambams, was that if you are watching from your second floor window as a guy gets out of his car and James opens the door for him, and he gets out, fine suited gentleman, with a gold-tipped cane, and he gets out, and you watch as the wallet drops out of his pocket, falls into the street, and 3 seconds later, James, have you seen my wallet? James doesn't see his wallet. You know exactly where his wallet is. It's lying. 5 feet behind him in the curb. He says, I can't believe it. I've lost it again. Oy, vai li chisaron kiss. The magic formula. I'll never see it again. Gives up hope on seeing it again. You rush down, but he's gone. He's back in the car, took off, pick up the wallet, has identification, has his picture, has everything, and you saw the guy drop it. What's the halacha? What's the halacha? After Yeyush. It's yours. Does that make sense? That makes sense. Is it ethical? Well, it has to be because it's in the Gemara. But you saw him. And you know exactly who it is. But the more prosaic case is where a guy comes to you, you didn't see the guy drop it, but you pick up the Aveda, the lost object, you take it home. 3 days later somebody says, did you perhaps find something? I think I lost, and describes it perfectly. If he had not uttered those words, I give up hope, Vaili Chisaron Kiss, he would have satisfied the requirements in halacha. In all other regards, we are the most meticulous of any civilization that I heard of in Hashavas Aveda. Aside, what is the country that is most associated with Hashavas Aveda in the Western world? Answer, Japan. They happen to take it seriously, and they have repositories where people can take lost objects and leave them there, and then people can pick them up later. What's the object that is lost the most? Umbrellas. Okay. Anyway, go figure. So we're so medacting, and that's why we teach kids Eilu Mitzias first, to teach them. It doesn't matter that we don't say finders, keepers, losers, weepers. It belonged to somebody. That person's ownership isn't extinguished because it fell out of his hand. Return it to him. It's the right thing. But after Yeyush, halacha changes. How could that be? So Moral offers a conjecture. The only one I've ever seen. Moral says that for property to be yours, it has to be associated with you in one of two ways. One is that it's physically under your control. You know where it is, you use it. Or B, even if it's not under your physical control, but you are psychologically connected to it. If both of those are lacking, it would be iffy to say that ownership is not extinguished, because think of it, ladies and gentlemen, there's only one thing in life that you hold on to even when you lose physical control and even if you lose psychological control, and that's life itself. Says the Maharal, to insist that ownership is maintained even when there is neither physical control nor psychic or psychological control would be equating property with life itself. And that is an ethical problem for us. Now, Shulchan Aruch, for the record, does say that it's a nice thing to do and a proper thing to do that if a person comes and shows his ownership, that you should return it. You don't have to, but it's a nice thing to do. And that itself, then, there are all kinds of halachas. If the person who finds it is a poor person, and the person who lost it is a rich person, he does not have to return it. And it's not even v'yasisa hayashav. But as far as halacha, to mandate this as law, would be an ethical problem if we equated property with life. Here's another one. If we wanted to wax poetic about Torah and how much we love it, what are some of the words we would use? How would we describe Torah? How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. Are there any images that come to mind about the magnificent beauty of Torah? Yeah, that's good. Anything else? Now go back to the end of Koheles. No, not that, not all the way to the end. A little bit before that. Let me see if I can find the pasuk. Thanks. Divrei Chachamim Kedar Banot. How do I love thee? You, Torah, to me are like cattle prods. Did that ever irk you? Shlomo HaMelech is trying to describe Torah, and the best description he can come up with is, you're so beloved, Torah, you're like a cattle prod. And he goes on, Uchemas meirot netuim ba'alei asufot. And you are like planted nails done by people who group together. It goes on. What is that all about? You're not going to find an approach in Rashi and Koheles. You're not going to find it in anybody in Mikros Gedolos who is going to stand back. Is this the way we want to remember Torah? What's Shlomo Melech up to? Okay, I'm running out of time. I've got to do this quickly. Says...
Don't forget about the tail.
And don't forget about the tail. And the source of Dibros. Divrei Torah... Divrei Chachamim Kedar Banos. There are people out there, lots of people out there, lots and lots and lots. And it's not just in today's times. They've been that way for century after century after century, who said, you guys are just into a superstitious bunch of nonsense. It's all hogwash. It's all meant to control. There's no rhyme or reason to it. None of it makes sense. First step, know that Torah is like a cattle prod. Meaning that what is the purpose of the cattle prod, the Gemara in Chagiga says, is to direct the animal in a straight manner, in a straight path to where it should get going. First level of Torah is to understand that Torah directs our lives. None of it is arbitrary. None of it is arbitrary. All of it is there to get us to live our lives, b'derech shivui, to do it properly. Imai, says the Gemara, if that's true, we got a problem. There are people around who think, I'll give Torah that credit. But you know what? I don't need Torah for that. I'll grant you that Torah gave wonderful direction to the Jewish people. And it's one of many such systems. There are all kinds of systems, ethical systems, cultural systems, that direct people how to live their lives. Ima, says the Gemara, if it's like a darban, just like a darban is portable, I might think that Torah is mitzul tal, portable. What's wrong with portable Torah? Says the Maral, what the Gemara means is that if you think that Torah is just that, and we have kiruv organizations that is right and left. This is the way you'll find, it's the best blueprint for life. I mean, they're right, 100% right. But it's only one level. When you argue that, you open yourself up to the counter-argument that there are other cultures that have perhaps come up with better ways of directing people how to live their lives. So what's the next one? They're like nails. Kemasmeros. No, there's something different about Torah, because this one is not portable. This one fixes you to something. What does it fix you to? It doesn't just direct you to life, it connects you to the Ribbon Shalom. Connection. Torah does that as well. And if you think that that's enough, it's kamasmeros netuos, planted. Planted things are not nails. Nails are never planted. But things that are planted grow. They expand. They're vital. They show bracha. They increase. There's a third level of Torah that you have to know about, that by definition, if it's Torah, Torah brings bracha and expansion, not just connection with Ribono Shel Olam, but growth. A lot more to say on that. I just want to do two more things. One thing and then Vashti's tell. Okay. Maral is very, very big on Seder. If you find the Gemara, so often, where there are three opinions in the Gemara, none of them seem to have anything to do with each other, about the same topic. Maral will see them as a stepwise progression. He'll see the connection between them and take you from one plane to the next. Give you one example. This time not from Chazal, but from HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. Aseres HaDibros. Coming up in 2 weeks. How do you split up Aseres HaDibros? Well, the first luach and the second one, Bein Adam Makom, Bein Adam L'Chaveiro. Different ways of doing it. I know of only one approach who takes all Aseres HaDibros and gets it down to a single principle. A single principle taken to level after level after level of sophistication. What's the single principle? Anochi Hashem Elokecha. Anochi Hashem Elokecha. That's not so hard. No, they believe that in courthouses in Tennessee until the ACLU makes them take it down. Everybody, believe in a God. We can all agree on that. Says the Maral, I'm going to take you through this very quickly. After the first of the 10 Dibros, the next 9 take you to more sophisticated appreciation of what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is. If you believe sincerely in HaKadosh Baruch Hu and you know what He is, then you can't allow yourself any competitor. Then the idea that there's something else competing with Him, sharing the limelight, awful. Okay? Now we're up to, after number 2, we're up to monotheism. What's the next one? What's the next one? Losisa. This one gets a little sophisticated. So a lot of people by now are not really going to follow. I don't mean in this audience. I mean the rest of the world. It means if you take HaKadosh Baruch Hu seriously and you understand, you understand what you don't understand, but you understand the magnitude of the principle. You understand just what is it to be the Ribono Shel Olam? How Ribono Shel Olam is everything in the universe. Is not only the creator up there and the watchmaker, but everything exists only as an outgrowth of His Ratzon. You are so dumbstruck by the majesty of who He is that if He gives you a name that you're supposed to address Him with, you're going to use it very discreetly. You're not going to take that name in vain. Because you understand that the name is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives you as a license to address Him. And you're going to address that, you're going to cherish that so much that you wouldn't take it in vain. Next. Shabbos. Shabbos? What does that have to do with belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Simple. There are people who believe in God. There were people, the United States of America would not have come into existence had people moved from 3 to 4. What was the religion practiced by the founding fathers? Deism. They weren't Christian. They were deists. They wrote it about themselves. A deist is somebody who believes in God. Sure, God's the creator. And He's up there and He left everything else to us. And He assigned us the job of doing everything else. He stays out of it. What does Shabbos tell you? HaKadosh Baruch Hu created everything. And we see all of creation and continued existence of everything as part of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's continued involvement with the world. He's not the watchmaker God, he's involved with the world. Next, Kabbalis Avicha v'Yasimecha. There are people who believe, yeah, God's involved in history, and can think of this great event and that great event. What does it have to do with me? Kabbalis Avicha v'Yasimecha, that you see, you understand that God is involved in the single most important thing in your universe, you. That you recognize that in your creation there were three partners. Your father, your mother, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That He chose your parents to be His shlichim to create you. You see HaKadosh Baruch Hu's handiwork in your parents bringing you into this world. And therefore you respect and honor your parents because they were the ones who were selected by HaKadosh Baruch Hu for that all-important job. Next. If you take HaKadosh Baruch Hu seriously, you cannot help but note HaKadosh Baruch Hu's action, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, where? In your fellow man. And the idea that you would take the life of another person to somehow destroy the Tselem Elokim, the image of God. If you can trifle with the image of God, you're trifling with God Himself. And after that, not only won't you take His life, you won't take the expansion of Himself, the completion of Himself, His spouse, or His property, neither by action, nor by speech, nor even, last one, not even in thought. So you've gone from positing the existence of God to seeing HaKadosh Baruch Hu in action in the world, in history, in your life, in your fellow man, so that the Tselem Elokim becomes so real that you won't even be jealous of what somebody else has. Vashti's tale. What would you do if you woke up one morning and you found that you had a 15-foot tail? First thing you do is you look at your insurance policy to see if you are covered for a tail excision surgery. Then they don't really help out at Kupat Cholim. You got a problem, besides they're closed. And you have a very important appointment. What do? Do you walk outside and try to see if you can get a banana down from the tree? It's probably not going to work. What do you do with it? It's painful. You can't do that. Lose blood. So until you can get to a surgeon, you try to coil it up, and not energetic and not at your best. She was not going to come out that way. That was Vashti's tale. Now, take that approach and explain it to the people around the table, and maybe they'll come back another time. Close with this, not from the Maral. Rav Eliezer Ashkenazi in the 16th century in Maaseh Hashem talks about the phrase used in the Torah so often in reference to Kabbanos. Reach nichoach. Reach nichoach. What does it mean to create a sweet savor for HaKadosh Baruch Hu? My oldest son lives in Texas. He wouldn't hear the problem. Barbecue. Sounds great. But the truth is, the stuff we put on the Mizbeach, except in the case of an Ola, is stuff that they wouldn't eat in Texas. Not the good stuff. So that's not going to work, even if HaKadosh Baruch Hu was a Texan. What does it mean, Reach Nichoach? Says the Maaseh Hashem, you walk into a kitchen where people have been working for hours, every kind of wonderful food for Shabbos, and you smell it, and 5 different dishes all hit you at the same time. Your mouth starts watering. You feel great. Why? Because you like the smell? Because you realize that whatever you're smelling, 3 hours from now, you're going to sit down at a table, you're going to get to eat it all. Says the Maaseh Hashem, what's a korban? A korban is a taste of things to come to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When a person says, I did a chait, or I want to bring in a dava, here I am, I want to elevate everything in the world for you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That is an appetizer, kaviyachol, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's really important, says the Ma'aseh Hashem, is what comes after. I hope I presented you with a little bit of an appetizer of the tremendous chachma of Moral. The main thing is that it should lead to a main course. Thank you.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming. If anybody has any more ideas of being Marbei Torah or other ideas for Shiurim Alei Adumim, you can approach me, the Gabayim. I thank Rabbi Adlerstein again. It was very, very, very special. And everybody should have a Chorev Bari and Tu B'Shvat Sameach soon. Kol Tov.